back to the channel. Today we are going over the Daniel Defense PCC. Before we get too far into it, there are a couple of disclosures I would like to give you. The first disclosure being is that Daniel Defense did not send this PCC out to me, so there is no monetary incentive for me to shill for any company. And then all of the ammunition and accoutrements you see on the PCC were paid for by me. There are no major sponsors of this channel. This video is going to be structured very similar to the PSA Saber video. I'm going to give you my range day experiences and how those went, and then I'm going to give you a full overview of the firearm. That seemed to resonate very well, so we'll do that for a couple more videos and see how it goes. Other than that, there's not much more to say besides, let's get into it. For my first range session, the first thing I did was zero the EOTech I have on here. That took me a total of about 5 rounds. After that, I immediately got into it. There was no taking it slow and breaking the PCC in. We immediately went on to movement and target transition drills. For the first 500 rounds, we had absolutely no malfunctions. And then on my first range session, I did decide to leave the bolt as is, just like we did with the PSA Saber. That way I can see how long the bolt is going to go before we have any malfunctions or need to clean it. And then I did have an unexpected guess, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Other than that, on the first range session, I did have a very interesting discovery. Whenever the bolt is locked back and you insert a new magazines, sometimes the bolt would send itself home involuntarily, chambering another round. This is a 35 round PMag that the gun ships with. Just so you guys can see, my finger is off the bolt catch and bolt release on the right hand side. I have a nice solid grip on the pistol grip. Whenever I go to put this magazine inside of the firearm, like I said, it doesn't happen every time, but it happens often enough. See, just like that, as to where I can notice it, just so you guys can see that it actually chambered around. It didn't happen all the time, but it did happen often enough to where it was easily recreatable with PMags and 20 round CZ Scorpion mags. I decided during that range session I would contact Daniel Defense to find out if that is a normal function of this firearm. Other than that, the first 500 rounds couldn't have gone any better, and I knew I was going to have a really good time filming with and training with this firearm for this video. During the second range session, which is rounds 500 through 1000, I did have one failure to feed, which was around round 700. Malfunction. Failure to feed. Other than that, for those next 500 rounds, the PCC did perform flawlessly, which is good, and I would hope so. Whenever it comes to the type of training I did during this session, I focused a lot on reactive shooting. So as soon as I see the red flash on the target, I would pull the trigger. And then I also focused on shooting on the move, which in my opinion is very important because your heart rate is elevated and you're challenging yourself to still make accurate shots. Just like in the first 500 rounds, the bolt would still slam itself home, but it was happening more consistently. Before range session number 2, I did contact Daniel Defense and they validated my concern, saying that is definitely not a normal function of the firearm. Whenever I contacted Daniel Defense, they requested I send the firearm in. Hopefully they're able to fix it in a timely manner and send the gun back to me functioning normally. So at this point with the gun, I'm 1,000 rounds in. I have one failure to feed. I have an RMA form with a return label for me to send the gun back in for repair. And before you all run to the comments saying that the bolt slamming itself home isn't that big of a deal, I understand that, just stick with me. I'll address that in a second. Moving on to range session and update number 3. At this point, the PCC has been sent back to Daniel Defense. They apparently fixed it and the gun was on the way back to us. I will say the turnaround time for the repair after Daniel Defense received the PCC, diagnosed the problem, fixed it, and put it back in the mail was about 4 business days. So with that, I was obviously very pleased. The tech that worked on the PCC stated that they found the fit on the mag catch / bolt catch assembly was a little loose, so they went ahead and replaced it. The tech also stated he shot 20 rounds of 115 grain FMJs and 20 rounds of 147 grain XTPs through 4 different magazines and reported no issues with the PCC. That's great, but the reliability of the PCC was never in question. It was always the bolt slamming home on its own. That was the issue. After receiving the PCC back, the first thing I did was obviously check to see if the bolt would still slam home on its own. It unfortunately was, and for those of you that are wondering how many mags I have and how many I was testing, I have 8 PMags and I have 2 20-round CZ Scorpion mags. The PCC wasn't discriminating between what mags I was using. It didn't care if it was the PMags or the CZ Scorpion mags. It was happening with both. After receiving the gun back, I did go ahead and put another 700 rounds through the PCC. So at this point, we are 1,700 rounds strong with 1 failure to feed. I do think that is pretty commendable. Like I said, the reliability of the PCC was never in question. It was always the bolt slamming home on its own. After receiving the gun back from Daniel Defense and discovering the issue wasn't fixed, I was obviously very disappointed. I consulted with a couple of my friends to see on how I should continue with this video. My buddy Andrew ultimately convinced me to submit one more RMA form just to give DD a chance to try and fix this issue. So that's exactly what I did. We submitted another RMA form. Daniel Defense sent us the return label on April 4th after waiting 17 business days and not getting any contact from Daniel Defense besides them letting us know they received the PCC. I reached out to see if I could get an update on the firearm. The customer service rep I spoke to was very eager and willing to help. He informed me he was going to drop what he was doing, figure out what's going on with my PCC and give me a call back as soon as he could. 20 to 30 minutes go by, I get a call back and he informed me that the engineers are aware of the problem and there's at least 3, I'm not sure if he was including this one, PCCs with the exact same issue, and he's waiting on a verdict from the engineers on how to handle the situation. The rep I spoke to said he would call us back as soon as he could once they reached a verdict on how they want to handle the situation. He also told me that the reason the RMA form has taken so long is because they were at a trade show for 5 of those business days, which is absolutely okay. I just think it's something to be observed. 2 more business days go by with no contact from Daniel Defense, but apparently the PCC was in the mail and on the way back to us. The tech that worked on the PCC stated they replaced the mag catch chassis and that they tested it with dummy rounds to see if the bolt would slam home on its own. The tech stated it passed the inspection. The tech stated he fired 30 rounds through the PCC, stopping every 4 to 5, locking the bolt back and reinserting the magazine to see if the bolt would slam home on its own. The tech stated the gun passed the inspection. After receiving the PCC, the gun unfortunately didn't pass my inspection because the exact same thing was still happening. Like I stated earlier, I know that the bolt slamming home on its own isn't that big of a deal, but it's more of the point of having an issue to begin with. To call a company's customer support team, have multiple customer service reps validate your concern. The company requests you send the gun back in for repair. They apparently fix the gun, send it back to you, and you discover the gun still isn't repaired is completely unacceptable in my personal opinion, especially for something that's retailing on average about $1,700 right now. That's just not right. I tried to give the company the benefit of the doubt, submit a second RMA form, wait 19 business days, but let's be fair and subtract 5 because they were at a trade show for 5 of those business days. So 14 business days go by, you finally get the gun back and it's still not fixed. That's just completely unacceptable in my personal opinion. So at this point, I'm 1,700 rounds in with 1 failure to feed and 2 RMA forms on this gun and still no solution. Moving on to the 4th and final update. At this point, I'm at a crossroads. I have enough experience in rounds on the PCC to be able to make a review and to be able to provide accurate and valuable information to my viewers, but I feel as if I've been kicked in the nuts. I've submitted 2 RMA forms with 2 apparent repairs, but we've had no solutions on the problem being fixed. So do I just accept defeat and do I put out the review, or do I continue to prolong it and contact Daniel Defense again? At this point, I did what I thought was the only reasonable thing. I contacted Daniel Defense for a 3rd time. They said they don't even want to attempt a repair. They're just going to completely replace the gun, which was fine by me. After receiving the return label, sending this one back to Daniel Defense, it took them about 10 business days to process the exchange and send the new gun back to me. That's not a complaint either, by the way. It's just something to note. After receiving the new PCC, I checked to see how far apart the serial numbers were from the original one I had and the replacement. The original one I had was serial number 1000 something. The replacement was serial number 8000 something. So a pretty significant amount of production time has passed between the original one and the replacement. After checking the serial number, I did the only obvious thing and checked to see if the bolt would still slam home on its own. To my surprise, it was still happening with the brand new Daniel Defense PCC they sent us with serial number 8000 something. At this point, my buddy Andrew also got himself a Daniel Defense PCC. His was serial number 7000 something, and it was having the exact same issue as the ones I was having. He agreed it's not that big of a deal as long as the gun picked up another round and didn't cause any sort of malfunctions. He was curious though to see if he could fix the issue himself. His diagnosis was to put a higher tension spring in the bolt catch and try to create a little more resistance to try to prevent the mag from interfering with the bolt catch assembly and dropping the bolt on its own. In doing so, changing the spring didn't support his hypothesis and actually made the issue worse because the spring itself was making contact with the bolt catch assembly, allowing the mag to interface easier. This leads me to believe the issue is far greater than anything I can handle and way out of my pay grade, or we just so happen to get 3 examples that are having the exact same issue. Let me know which one's more probable in the comments. At this point, I did the only reasonable thing. That being, I put another 1,000 rounds through the new PCC just to make sure it was as reliable as the first one we got. I'm pleased to say I had no malfunctions at all. So in 2,700 rounds, 1,700 on one and 1,000 on the other, I've had 1 failure to feed with no cleaning, and the majority of ammunition I shot was Winchester white box. I would say that's pretty impressive. Now that I've gone over my range sessions and experience with the PCCs, let's actually dive into the guns themselves. Just for a quick note, whenever you're watching the B-roll footage on the overview of the guns, the one with the hand wrap on the handguard is the original PCC. The one without, like you see it here, is the replacement. With that being said, let's dive into the gun. We'll start with the muzzle device and work our way back. So the factory OEM muzzle device is just a standard flash hider, but it can easily be replaced because the thread pitch on here is 1/2 by 28. so that it will accommodate pretty much anything you want to put on here to mount some sort of suppressor if you'd wish to do so. This specific model is the pistol variant, so it is a 8.3 inch barrel that is cold hammer forged, which is good according to industry leading influencers, and has a 1 in 10 twist. The 1 in 10 twist aids in accuracy and helps extend barrel life. Daniel Defense is known for making high quality AR-15 barrels that provide the user with above average accuracy and longevity. The PCC itself is no exception. All right, we're at like 52 yards. Let's start off with a headshot. All right, let's do left shoulder now. All right, let's do right side. A little to the left. See if we can make up for it. There we go. All right, let's do let's do left abdomen. All right, let's do the right side now. A little to the left. It's my fault. All right, let's do like the bolt right where it holds the steel target in place. Nice. All right, let's do like belly button area. Nice. Overall for PCC, pretty accurate. Now we're at about 99 yards. Let's see if we can get 5 consecutive hits in a row. All right, 5 in a row. Let's see if we can get one-handed. Nice. I'm extremely satisfied and impressed with the accuracy I've received out of this PCC, so I have no notes on the barrel. Good job, Daniel Defense. Like I mentioned in the range day overviews, the majority of the ammunition I used out of this firearm was 115 grain Winchester white box, which is some of the crappiest range day ammo you can buy. The accuracy I just displayed calling out my hits was with that 115 grain Winchester white box ammunition. So final verdict on the barrel, accuracy good. I'm very impressed. No notes. Good job, Daniel Defense. Working our way back to the handguard, I have to say this is probably my favorite handguard out of any PCC I've had the opportunity to shoot, just because of the familiarity of it pretty much being an AR-15 handguard. The rail itself is 7 inches, which pairs perfectly with the 8.3 inch barrel. It maximizes rail space but doesn't interfere with you using a suppressor. The PCC also ships with a hand stop that I removed immediately. It just felt funky on this handguard. The rail itself is plentiful, which is good because you have plenty of M-LOK accessories to be able to mount anything you want. As you can see, I have a Surefire Scout Mini with a Unity hot button on here, and I still have plenty of rail space on pretty much either side to mount what I want. It also features Daniel Defense's lockup system, which is known to be reliable and rugged, so that's good. Good job, Daniel Defense. I've shot a ton of other PCCs like the Springfield Kuna, the Grand Strybog, the AKV, etc., but I don't have very much experience with other AR-9s. But this handguard by far is the most superior out of any other PCC I've gotten my hands on. It's also more aesthetically pleasing compared to other AR-9s, and yes, regardless of what your Punisher Skull uncle says, aesthetics matter, at least to a certain point. And then before I forget, the PCC does feature QD points on either side of the rail for your sling, but as you can see, I've added this Magpul QD point for a sling myself. That's because whenever I put a sling in that point right there on the side of the handrail, whenever I go to fire the weapon, it just digs into my wrist and it drives me freaking crazy. It's more of a personal preference thing, but it is something to note. Overall, I'm a big fan of this handguard. No other notes. Great job, Daniel Defense. Moving back to the lower, this is where things get really interesting with the PCC. Before we get too far into it, I'll give you a quick spec rundown. The lower itself is completely ambi, so what that translates to is that the safety, the bolt catch and bolt release, magazine release, and charging handle can all be actuated on either side of the firearm. The trigger itself is just the classic mil-spec trigger DD uses in the majority of their firearms, but it does accept AR-15 trigger packs, so you can easily replace it for one of your favorite triggers if you wish to do so. I will say for a PCC that MSRPs for about $2,000, but on average street price is $1,600 to $1,700, they give you arguably the worst safety, trigger, and in my personal opinion, coming from a righty's perspective, worst ambi bolt catch and bolt release design possible. If my lefty friends can give me any insight on what bolt catch and bolt release design for the right side of the rifle or pistol is superior in the comments, that would be greatly appreciated. The first thing we'll do is we'll look at the trigger Daniel Defense gives you that just comes straight from the factory. In my opinion, like I said, is probably arguably the worst trigger they possibly could have given you. It is, in my opinion, like a 2-stage trigger. There's a little bit of a wall, then you hit the wall there, pull through it. It's like a 5 or 6 pound break with a pretty long reset. Let's do it again. So there's your first wall right there, a few millimeters of play, and then pull through it like 5 or 6 pounds. and then you have that extremely long reset. Moving on to the safety, it just doesn't have any sort of tactileness or click to it whenever you actuate it on and off safe. It has a lot of slop in it, and it just feels really mushy. And then the safety itself is, in my opinion, way too long. I think Daniel Defense definitely needs to redevelop the safety they use in the majority of their firearms. And then whenever I'm firing, because of how long the safety is, you can see it driving into my trigger finger right there. Overall, for how much Daniel Defense charges for their firearms, I think they can at least do the courtesy of giving a better safety and a better trigger. But I know what you're thinking. They did make it to where it does accept AR-15 trigger packs, and you can replace the safety with one you do prefer. But you do have to put it into the perspective of the gun itself is already extremely overpriced. To put a decent trigger and a decent safety in here is at least another couple $100 on top of that. That's my biggest complaint with Daniel Defense is I love their products, but the trigger and safety they give you is just complete garbage. And then the charging handle, I have no complaints about the charging handle. I've used it actually in a couple of my other rifles voluntarily. I have no complaints on it. I maybe would just want the wings to be a little bit bigger. Outside of that, the texturing is nice, and like I said, it's ambi, so overall a solid charging handle. But this one is proprietary, you can't change it, so if you don't like the Daniel Defense charging handle, womp womp, you can't exchange it with a new one. And then like I said, I am not a fan of this ambi bolt design. In my opinion, it's arguably the worst one, and that's strictly coming from the perspective of a righty. The only ideal use for this for a righty is if you'd want to lock the bolt back, say during a malfunction. All you have to do is literally pull the charging handle, push down on the bolt lock like that, and you're good. But if you want to use it during reloads to send the bolt home using it, depending on your hand size, you actually have to break your grip on the pistol grip like that to be able to actuate it, which isn't ideal for me personally. But like I said, it's really great for clearing malfunctions, but I hope you don't have to be clearing malfunctions out of your firearm consistently. That wouldn't be good, but that's not the case for this PCC. 2,700 rounds strong with only one failure to feed. That's pretty good. Moving on to the magwell itself, it is flared nicely and I have no complaints. Reloads are easy with PMags. With Scorpion mags, for some reason, I did struggle to make quick and accurate reloads when reinserting the mag, but it's mostly probably a skill issue. It's probably not a magazine issue, so that's on me, but it is something to note. That's why for the majority of my training, I use these PMags. The PCC itself uses the AR-15 style mag release, which I think is a good idea because a lot of PCCs have that weird paddle design. This is very intuitive, just like many AR-15 controls are. You just push the button, magazine comes out. I will say another reason why I use these PMags a lot is because whenever I was using Scorpion mags, they didn't like to drop freely. Whenever I would go to perform a reload, I would have to manually remove them, then reinsert the other magazine. Majority of the time with these PMags, they drop freely, which I really like. And then using Scorpion mags was a wise choice on Daniel Defense's part. There's no reason to give us a proprietary magazine when it's not necessary. CZ Scorpion mags are great and they're plentiful and they're relatively affordable as well. So good job Daniel Defense on that aspect of things. And then one more note about the magwell and then I'll move on. On my very first training session, I noticed that I wasn't able to insert fully loaded magazines on a closed bolt. I was obviously annoyed at first, but Andrew did some big brain research and by that, he just read the manual. That is a 100% normal function of the firearm. So no tack reloads or just download your magazines by one and you'll be fine. While we're here, let's talk about the operating system. The operating system in here is a direct blowback. If you don't know what that is, I'll give you a very brief explanation of what it is. Essentially, whenever you fire a round, the gases push the bullet forward down the barrel while simultaneously pushing the bolt back to extract the spent casing and cycle another round. But that's the very simple version. The reason why I'm talking about it is because using direct blowback PCCs have more recoil than usual for a 9mm PCC. Daniel Defense gives you a hydraulic buffer to try to help mitigate some of that recoil that the direct blowback gives you. How this hydraulic buffer works is as the bolt reciprocates back, it slams into the buffer. This piston compresses, slowing the bolt down, in theory, helping mitigate recoil. I will say the recoil impulse is quite manageable. The PCC definitely doesn't have more recoil than it's supposed to, so that's a good thing. In theory, I guess the hydraulic buffer is doing its job. The bolt on both PCCs have held up well. This specific one has, like I said, 1,000 rounds on it, and there's no significant wear on the bolt itself, so that's good. Good job, Daniel Defense. And then moving on to the furniture Daniel Defense gives you, you get the classic Daniel Defense pistol grip, which I'm not a fan of personally. This rubber, whenever it gets wet or whenever I'm sweating, just tends to slip around in my hand. And then if this was the SBR version, they would give you the classic Daniel Defense buttstock, but because this is a pistol, they give you an SBA 3 brace. Just like an AR-15, your castle nut is right here, and it's only been staked once, not that big of a deal, but I would prefer it to be staked twice. And then your end plate right here does have a QD point for a sling, so if you prefer to run it right there, you can. And then the SBA 3 brace is cool. It was my favorite one up until the SBA 5. I just haven't switched it out because I don't want to spend money on it. This one works fine. Now that we've come to the end of the overview of the firearm, what's my final verdict on the Daniel Defense PCC? Let me give you a quick recap and I'll answer that as I go. The muzzle device is okay, it's just a standard flash hider, but the thread pitch is 1/2 by 28, so you can easily accommodate whatever suppressor you want to put on there. The barrel itself is extremely accurate and extremely reliable. I've been very impressed with the accuracy I've achieved with the PCC, so that's good. This handguard is by far my favorite PCC handguard I've gotten my hands on, so another good job on Daniel Defense. Love this handguard. The lower itself is nothing special. It does take AR-15 trigger packs, but they give you a horrendous mil-spec trigger, one of my least favorite safeties of all time, a proprietary ambi charging handle, which I have no beef with, but they do give you arguably the worst bolt catch and bolt release that's ambi for a righty, in my opinion. The PCC itself does take Scorpion mags, which was a good job on Daniel Defense for using Scorpion mags and not making a proprietary magazine for this thing. The CZ Scorpion mags are plentiful, they are reliable, and they're affordable, so good job DD on that. I'm not super crazy about the pistol grip, but you can change it, and they do give you a SBA 3 brace, which is fine. Nothing to complain about there. Overall, in my opinion, if I had to choose one PCC to have for the rest of my life besides an MP5, I think I'm going with this thing strictly due to how accurate and how reliable it's been for me. A lot of people like to argue when talking about the Daniel Defense PCC that it's extremely overpriced and it's not innovative enough. While I do agree that this thing is overpriced, innovation sometimes doesn't need to happen whenever you're developing firearms. I'll take something that is extremely accurate and extremely reliable over something that's innovative and unreliable any day of the week. And I think Daniel Defense did knock it out of the park with this PCC whenever it comes to reliability, accuracy, and the actual tuning of the buffer system itself. So overall, like I said, if I had to choose one PCC besides an MP5 to have for the rest of my life, I'm choosing this one. You may or may not agree, and if you do or don't, let me know why in the comments. Other than that, I thank you all for sticking around until the end. I know time is short, but thank you for spending it with me. As a treat for making it here, I was blessed enough recently to be able to go on a trip to Wyoming, and there I got all sorts of beautiful footage, and it'd be a shame if nobody got to see it. So at the end of this video, I'll put a montage of the clips I did collect while I was there. I will say the footage itself doesn't really do it justice. I never really understood the hype about the West until I got to go out there. Now I've fallen in love with it. If there's anything else you want to hear me talk about, any accessories or firearms, let me know what they are in the comments. If you agree or disagree with anything I said, let me know why in the comments as well. But until then, I'll be back with more videos.